Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's coverage with Just Johnda. I am going to be using the C SPAN live stream tonight so that we don't have as much stuff when commercials and other things come on. So, really excited to get this going. And for those who are going to hear this after the fact on the podcast, uh, I welcome you all to the stream as well. So it is looking to be an exciting night. There's lots of commentary that's going to be going on. And honestly, let's face it, we really don't know what the heck we're going to get with all of this. I can simply say that I'm super excited because we've been waiting for this for the longest. So we're going to get started. If you're in the chat, go ahead and make any comments you want. I'd love to watch, and we're going to engage throughout the night. Hopefully, we'll have some guests. There's so many debate parties going on that some of my guests may or may not have an opportunity to come in, but we are going to go forward anyway. Please ignore if you hear some dogs. They go a little crazy when people come home, and I'm working from my home studio. So that is where we're going to go with it tonight. So, once again, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to share this on some of my other socials to make sure. So, if you see me clicking around, that's why. So I'm still 100% here with you, but I may click around a little bit just to make sure that everything is going as intended. So right now, you're just going to see the full screen of what's going on in C-SPAN, and then we are going to get started. So countdown in about 5 minutes at approximately 8:40. We are going to talk about the debate rules. We're going to talk about what's at stake. We're going to talk about whether or not tonight is just an exercise in both candidates preaching to the choir, so to speak, or their respective choirs in this regard, and whether or not we think that based on at least some of the pre talk, either of them are going to be able to move their pendulum forward. And then, of course, the main event, 9 o'clock, when the debate begins, we are going to sit back and watch. I'm going to jump in with some comments. I'm going to be definitely clicking it up in the comments box with you all, as well as giving some commentary in between. So again, in about 4 minutes now at 8:40, we are getting into it. So stay tuned, share this with your friends because it is on and popping over here with Just Johnda.
A viable option.
All right, Beverly, what message would work to do that, do you think?
Respect. And
just respect, welcome. Just a tone of voice, not a policy issue.
I mean, the policy issues are tricky out here, but I think it's really more about feeling respected, not alienated, not humiliated, the opposite of the basket of deplorables. Because once that hit, I heard from my friends over and over again, that was it. And they would never consider voting for her. And so I think Harris has to be really careful in a community like mine It's to not trip over an insult or an unintended issue that's going to alienate people. Because there are former Trump voters, they're very quiet. They won't put out yard signs. They won't really talk about it. I've had offline, in-person conversations, and they're willing to not vote for Trump, but they have to not be offended by Harris. And so I really hope she can thread that needle and do a beautiful job of leaving the door open for them with graciousness and welcome.
All right. Beverly in Virginia, Democratic caller there. John, Lakewood, New Jersey, Republican. John.
Yes, hello.
Hi, John. What do you want to hear from the former president tonight?
I'd actually like to hear from the vice president.
Okay.
I'd like to hear her speaking about the border. I think a lot of people are wondering about that, like where's she been, in the last few years. And I'd also like to hear her, answering up for her, for foreign policy, especially in Israel, the conflict, and to hear more what she's going to do about that.
Okay. All right. We will be simulcasting ABC's debate here on C-SPAN networks, and you can watch here when it begins at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Also, if you're on the go, you can watch on our free video mobile app, C-SPAN Now, and you can also on our website, cspan.org. You'll be able to find the debate after it's over tonight as well. When it concludes, we're going to go back to the phone lines and have a conversation with all of you and get your reaction to tonight's debate as well. We're expecting it to last about 90 minutes. So around 10:40 p.m. Eastern time is when we expect the debate to wrap. They're going to have 2 commercial breaks, and that's when we will pick up here with resume our conversation with all of you tonight and get your reaction. Joyce in Asbury Park, New Jersey, Democratic caller. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, go ahead. And what do you want to hear from the candidates tonight?
Well, I really don't care what Trump says because I would never, ever vote for him. So I really don't care because all he does is lie anyway. But I would like for the VP to speak more about her policies, since there's so many people out there stating that she doesn't have any policies. She has a lot of policies. She has a great agenda that she wants to put forth to the country. So that's what I would like to hear. But I would also like to address one caller when they said that she should be respectful to his supporters. I totally disagree, because his supporters are very disrespectful and they're rude, and some of them you just can't talk to. So she's a very respectful person anyway. So I just think that call was just unnecessary and really didn't make any sense. But basically, that's all I have to say.
Okay, Joyce. Kevin in Hampton, Virginia, Republican. Kevin, our cameras are inside the Philadelphia Convention Center tonight. That is where all the media has gathered ahead of tonight's debate. And that's where we're going to hear from supporters of these candidates. Some already talking to the media ahead of tonight's debate. There'll be more in the so-called spin room after the debate. Kevin, what do you want to hear tonight?
I'd like to hear some honesty, some civility, and
All right, everyone, I am back and we are getting started. So, if you are here with me, I know it's because you are excited to watch tonight's debate just like I am. So, we were hearing a little bit on C-SPAN while I was getting some things going over here backstage about what people want to hear tonight. And we're definitely going to talk about that, as I said a few minutes ago before I popped out. We talked about the fact that there are people who are still going, oh, I'm undecided. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. And then there are some people who are doggedly on one side or the other. So once again, let's get going. So hello, everyone who just came in the door. I am super excited tonight for our second presidential debate. Of course, we know that the first one did not involve our current candidates, or at least our current candidate for on the Democratic ticket. However, this is technically the second presidential debate, and we're going to talk about the impact that the first debate had on where we are now. But before we get to all of that, for those of you who are new to this, my name is Just Johnda. I'm an attorney. I am a commentator on all things pop culture, politics. I'm an author and perpetual entrepreneur. And most importantly, I am a proud voter. I'm a mom. I'm a daughter. I'm a wife. I'm all of these things that make up who we are, right? I'm no different than any of the rest of you, except I like to go on live and talk about politics. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. So, again, if you're new here and you're just meeting me, I am Just Johnda. And let's get going. So, second presidential debate of 2024. A lot at stake, potentially history making on both sides. I know that there's been a lot of conversations about how history would be made if Vice President Kamala Harris got elected. She gets elected. She's a woman. She is African American and Jamaican descent. So we do know that there is a lot. I apologize. She is, I called her African American and Jamaican descent. She is actually Indian and Jamaican. She identifies as Black. So just wanted to make that clear. Either way, huge history being made there if she is elected. However, I think what we often don't talk about, mainly because a lot of us don't want to, is if former President Trump gets elected, this is an individual who is now a convicted felon. He also just left office a mere 4 years ago and is running again. He also was accused of essentially committing crimes against the United States with the whole January 6th debacle. There is a lot of things that would be history making, although many would say not exactly in the best way as it relates to President Trump as well, or former President Trump as well. So tonight's debate, it is in Philadelphia. It is going to be handled and moderated by ABC, and there are some pretty strict rules that they have put in place. These rules have been debated quite a bit, so I made sure that I got them right. There's not a lot of them, but just enough to trip up a candidate, particularly a candidate like former President Trump, who likes to, for want of a better way of putting it, color outside of the lines when it comes to debating in terms of talking over people and all of those things. So the mic was a big issue. Interestingly enough, it was the Harris team who really didn't like the muting the mic piece, but quite frankly, I think that I can understand it as a debater, why you wouldn't want your mic to be muted if you felt like it was reasonable for you to jump in. But honestly, I think that it probably works to Vice President Harris's benefit to not get into sparring matches with Trump over ridiculous things. I'm going to call him 45. He was 45th president. So to get into it with 45 over ridiculous things, over him potentially jumping in and things turning ugly. So why bother doing that? So let's go over the rules, and then we're going to talk about what is really at stake in terms of the issues as well as the individuals that each are seeking out to. If I look to the left a little bit, it is, well, my left. I guess it's my right, but it's going to be your left. It's because I'm looking at my laptop to get me these rules because I want to make sure that I have them right. So here we go. There will be no live audience. Now, there wasn't a live audience at the last debate either. So no live in studio audience, and part of that is to minimize disruptions, extended applause, people yelling out. This rule change, according to the New York Times, was initially set by the Biden campaign. And essentially, they just wanted to cut down on the spectacle. And the reality of it is that given who they're running against, well, a spectacle is something that you definitely have to be concerned about. So we already know no live audience. I'm actually good with that. Next, muted microphones. I mentioned that before, that there was a concern from the Harris camp about the muted microphones. I actually think that's a great idea. While it is, I love a good debate. I love a good spirited debate, and you're jumping in and, all of that. Given the nature of what is going on, what is at stake, how volatile one of the candidates could potentially be. I won't say any names, 45. I think that the muted microphones is good. Let's just keep it civil. Let's keep it simple. At this point, especially for the Harris campaign, you are literally in a fight for the life of your campaign. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But the bottom line is the more people can just, or at least Vice President Harris anyway, can speak succinctly and simply and get out her issues and talk about the issues that people want to hear, talk about her platform, answer the questions in a manner that we know that she is perfectly capable of doing, given her experience in this arena, the better, without being interrupted, without being thrown off. And I hope that even though he can't jump in because of the muted mics, that she doesn't allow herself to be taken off track with whatever is said before. You have to just stick to reaching the people that you need to reach. Next, no opening statement. So we're not going to get a bunch of flowery language from either one of them, flowery or fiery from either one of them to start this debate. The debate is just going to start with questions. Each of them, of course, will have an opportunity to rebuttal if needed, or to do follow-up as needed. The answers are 2 minutes. You get 1 minute of follow-up, and then there's also rebuttal as well. I do see someone in the chat. Yes, I am monitoring the chat. I can see it. So unless it starts going too fast, in which case I'll slow it down. I am monitoring it. I am going to be paying attention to the chat, taking questions and posting them, posting your comments on the screen. And as we go through the night, I will also post the link in the chat to bring people up on screen as well. So great question. I will be doing that. And so please, throughout the night, please put your comments in. Now, I'm not going to constantly be interrupting by talking, but I will be interacting in the comments. And of course, I may say things here or there. And of course, doing some recaps during the commercials. And as when we have those moments, I will be putting things on the screen. So please continue the chat, because as the debate is going on, the things that we're saying in the comments, I will be putting them on the screen. So I talked about no opening statements. The setup, this one's easy. They'll both be standing at identical lecterns. This is set to go for about 90 minutes. They will each have a notepad, a pen, a bottle of water. This is all from the New York Times, but I love the minutia, just in case you don't. We have two commercial breaks. Of course, we'll use those to get our talk on during those commercial breaks. So I'm going to put the laptop to the side for a second. I'm going to be taking notes as well. I don't know why I moved it to the side, because I'm going to be taking notes throughout, because I want to make sure that when we have a chance to talk, we will be hitting those points. Okay, so we are looks like about 7 minutes away. So let's get into what is at stake for both candidates. So let's talk about former President Trump and what is at stake. Well, generally speaking, I'll speak about both of them and then I'll go individually. So generally speaking, battlegrounds are at stake. Are at stake. You have the battleground states right now of Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, and Wisconsin. Right now, Pennsylvania has them at a tie. Georgia, according to a recent poll, has them at roughly a tie, but I'm not sure I really believe that. I think Georgia we're going to consider to be in the battleground. Right now, Arizona potentially at play. Arizona tends to be solidly red, and ever so often we can kind of turn it, so for a while we thought Arizona might be purple, but no, Arizona to me is pretty solidly red. However, interesting news coming out as it relates to Arizona. In Arizona, Trump is only ahead by 5 points. So that's not as solid as as they would typically want for a state like Arizona. But these other states that are battleground states are huge, because why? We know those electoral votes. So again, Georgia, Michigan, and these places are nothing new. That's why who was going to be vice president was crucial as well. Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Wisconsin, right now a tie in Pennsylvania. That is not good. Pennsylvania has a lot of electoral votes at stake. Pennsylvania tends to be blue, so for that to be a tie is very concerning. Arizona hope to gain those points. So those are the battlegrounds at stake. Now, personally for the candidates, President Trump or former President Trump has to appease his base while at the same time figuring out a way to maneuver around Project 2025. He has not done the best job of doing that. He tries to claim that Project 2025 is not his platform, but he tends to say a lot of things that are in Project 2025. So that's going to be an interesting spot for him to maneuver around. And quite frankly, he hasn't done a very good job of it, because he's got to appease his base. Right now, the house is on fire for him. So he can't lose any of the people who are solidly behind him. And of course, he needs to gain people. Now, the good thing for Donald Trump as it relates to gaining is he's got a couple of things on his side. He's white, he's male, he's a former president, and he knows how to turn up the heat when it comes to firing up the nastiest side of the base, the people who typically don't come out until you start spewing things that fall into the racist, homophobic, xenophobic, and sexist arena. That tends to bring out a part, and we've seen this before in record numbers. So if they have to pull that out of their pockets, they will. And so it's just a matter of whether or not they feel the need to. He's been spinning out a little bit, though. Now, what is at stake for Harris? Now, for her, for Vice President Harris, this is a huge night because her detractors claim that they still don't know her, still don't know what she stands for. They claim they don't know what she does, what she has, what she's done as vice president. Forget the fact that she was a senator or an attorney general or any of that stuff. my Just Johnda take on it, the years of politics for me, dusting off that poli-sci degree, I would say tonight is not a night to waste time on detractors. People who are doggedly in that camp as it relates to Harris are never going to vote for her because there's elements of that that simply don't make any sense. So there's people who you aren't going to win. The undecideds, they're a tricky bunch too, because at this point we are 56 days away from an election, and I have spent my entire adult life and my entire career never hanging my hat on undecided voters because I simply don't believe in them. I know that there are people who claim they are undecided. Undecided people know exactly who they're going to vote for. Either they don't want to say who they are going to vote for, or they're just not going to vote. Now, if that has annoyed, teed off, because I'm trying to make sure that the algorithm doesn't kick me off. If that has made some undecided voters go, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about." Well, guess what? You're still walking around 56 days away from an election saying that you're undecided. So who's the idiot here? Young people are going to be important. That is going to be a group that she is trying to reach. Now, I think that when it comes to issues like Israel, when it comes to young voters, that's going to be a tough one. However, if she can solidly state her case as it relates to education and filling the education gap, if she can solidly state her case as it relates to, and if you go to her website, you'll see it, if she can solidly state her case as it relates to the rental and housing market, because that really impacts young people, especially in their 20s and 30s, as well as solidly state her case on social issues, which, of course, she's got, at least for those who are liberal as it relates to social issues, and especially young women, that she's got former President Trump, or as I'm going to continue to call him, 45. She's got him beat coming and going, especially especially for young women who are concerned about reproductive rights, especially when you're talking about things like gun control and those types of things, civil rights and civil liberties. Those are things that sometimes you can usually get young people before they become old and jaded like the rest of us. So that is going to be important. And that is why she doesn't need to waste her time getting into sparring matches with 45. So those are going to be important issues for her. And again, hi, by the way, hello to everyone out there who is a part of the Win with Black Women crew. I thank you all for promoting this telecast. I really appreciate that, and happy to be on board with what we're doing. Also, if you see this little red cup come out in this straw, that's just me trying to stay hydrated, because there is a lot of talking that's going to go on. And for those of you who have hung with me before, whether it's listening to my podcast or anything else, then you know if that's one thing I can do, it is talk. Okay, so I'm going to show this comment from S Level, who says we may be able to win Arizona. Okay, you got to tell us a little bit more about that. The debate is about to start, so I'm not going to bring you up, but please tell us a little bit more in the comments, S Level, about why you think we may be able to win Arizona tonight. This is exciting for sure. So again, tell us why you think we can do that. All right, I am going to pull up the sound right now.
now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely
We're definitely going to talk about. We're definitely going to talk about how how and why
candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing: 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications,
okay, we're 2 minutes
or responses.
away. All right,
Their
I can mute
microphones will
again
only
because
be
I
turned
do
on when
want
it's
us
their
to
turn to
touch
speak.
on that
No
a bit,
pre-written
and
notes
of
allowed.
course
There
we
is
will
no
come
audience
back.
here tonight in this
We'll
hall
come
at the
back to
National
it. Now
Constitution
we
Center.
do
This is an
know
intimate
that one of the major issues, although nobody really wants to come out and say it, but one of the major things that led to where we are tonight, and happily so, was President Biden's performance in the first debate. Okay, the candidates are coming out. So I am just going to go ahead. All right, there's the obligatory handshake.
Have you. It's an honor to have you both here
All
tonight.
right, here
Good
we go.
evening. We
I
are
think
looking
everybody's
forward to a
timing is
spirited
off. I
and
think
thoughtful
C-SPAN
debate.
is about a
So
minute
let's
or
get
so
started.
behind. I
I
noticed
want to
that
begin
earlier.
tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado.
This is such
They are
a
taking
dog
over the
whistle.
towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that
This
she
is
and
such a dog
Biden
led
led
We
into our
know
country,
that
and they're
individuals
destroying our
coming from
country.
other
They're
countries
dangerous.
are
They're at the
not
highest
coming
level of
in and
criminality,
taking
and we
away
have to get them
jobs
out. We
that
have to get them out
Americans
fast. I
actually
created one of the
want
greatest
to do.
economies in the history of our country.
In
I'll
fact,
do it again and
right
even better.
We
now,
are going to
there
get to
are
immigration and
millions
border
of
security
jobs
during this
being
debate, but
unfilled
I would
because
like to let Vice
Americans
President
are
Harris
not
respond on the economy.
doing
Well,
skilled
I would
labor
love to.
jobs.
Let's talk
Americans
about
have
what
taken
Donald Trump
are not
left
doing
us.
the type of
Donald
jobs
Trump
that you learn
left
about
us
in
the
shop class
worst
at school.
unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much
You
more
know
in
he's going
common
to
than what
claim that
separates us.
Project
And I
2025 is
pledge
a
to
myth.
you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025.
See,
That's
you knew
out
it.
there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things
They
that
made
nobody thought
ventilators
possible.
for the
And people
world.
give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest
The
people.
frown
I am
slays me
offering
every
what I
time.
describe as an opportunity economy. And the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. I gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up
Nobody
our
thinks your
worth, our
plan
value
is
as a
that
country. It's going to make
brilliant.
people want to be able to go
Even
and
if
work
they
and
think it's good,
create jobs and create a
nobody
lot of
called it
good, solid
brilliant.
money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan.
It's
She
getting
doesn't have a
nasty.
plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time.
Inflation
People
was
can't go out and
bound
buy
to
cereal or
happen
bacon or eggs
post-pandemic.
or anything else.
It's an
The people
unfortunate
of our
fact,
country
no
are
matter who
absolutely dying with
inherited
what they've done.
the
They've
country
destroyed the
during that
economy.
time, because
And all you have to
obviously
do is
we
look
were
at a
in the
poll.
middle of
The
a
polls say
change in
80 and
that we were in the
85
middle
and
of
even
an election.
90% that the Trump economy
Coming
was
out of
great, that their
was
economy was terrible.
Vice
going to
President Harris, I do want
be
to ask for your response.
difficult
And you heard what the president
for
said there,
anyone
because the
from an
Biden
inflation
administration did keep
standpoint,
a
because
number of the Trump tariffs in
that's
place. So how
not
do you
just about
respond?
us. The
Well,
entire
let's be
world was
clear that
affected,
the
and we
Trump
live in a world
administration
economy.
resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist.
It's an important part
Everybody
of the
knows she's a
economic. I
Marxist.
mean, it's an
Her father's
unfortunate
a
part of
Marxist
the
professor in
economic
economics,
cycle,
and he
Sean.
taught her
But
well.
you,
But when you
you're
look
right,
at what she's
it
done
really
to our
is.
country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I
That
believe,
was, for
21
those
million
of you
people,
who are
not the
listening
15
via
that people
podcast,
say.
that
And I think it's a lot
was
higher
a
than 21.
little
That's bigger
exchange
than
in the
New York
chat
State pouring in.
regarding
And just look at what they're doing to our country.
regarding
They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are
inflation.
criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion,
What
because the baby
on
is born
earth?
is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President
We
Trump.
knew
Well, as
that.
I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted?
That
pregnant women
Vice
who want to
President
carry
Harris is
a
being
pregnancy to
very
term, suffering
specific
from a
about
miscarriage, being
speaking
denied
to
care
women.
in an emergency room because the
And it's
healthcare
not
providers are afraid
just
they might go
about
to jail,
people
and she's
going out
bleeding out in
and
a car in the parking lot.
getting
She didn't
and
want that.
terminating
Her
pregnancies
husband didn't want
willy-nilly.
that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term? They don't want that.
Give
And I
specific
pledge to
examples.
you,
Excellent.
when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v.
And I
Wade,
do
as
agree with
President of the
you,
United States, I
S.
will
Levels,
proudly
to
sign it
keep hammering
into law.
that
But
Project
understand,
2025. He
if Donald
cannot
Trump were
distance
to be
himself from
reelected,
that.
he will sign a
These
national
are his
abortion ban.
supporters.
Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your
These are
miscarriages. I think
individuals
the American
who
people
have
believe
literally
that
paid
certain
for his
freedoms,
candidacy.
in
He
particular the
cannot
freedom to make
distance
decisions
himself
about
from it.
one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of when they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got
fought it,
taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea, and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost
loans, or at least they attempted
the millions and millions of people that had
Your
to pay off their
party
student
fought it,
loans.
and most
They didn't get it for
recently,
free,
the
but they were
Supreme
saying
Court
it's the same way that
has
they talked
fought it.
about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just
Don't
get a
even
yes
get
or no,
me
because you're
started on
running
the
the
student
agenda,
loans thing,
JD
because
Vance
this
has
new
said that
round
you
was
would
supposed to
veto it
help
if it
people
did
like
come to
me.
your desk.
Well,
So
I didn't discuss it with JD. In all fairness, JD,
I could do
and
a
I
whole
don't mind if
situation
he
on that.
has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me. But I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working
the IVF
people, working
situation
women
is ridiculous.
who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs, barely can afford to do it. And what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing,
he's been a leader on fertilization.
You should ask.
You know,
will she allow abortion
you know what?
in the 8th
there
month,
are some things
9th
I could say
month,
about
7th
him
month?
being a leader on fertilization.
Okay, would you do that?
I'll be kind.
Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country.
What?
Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
Oh,
and
snap.
Understand, this comes at a time
He said he
where
prefers
the
to
people
run
of our
on a
country
problem
actually
instead
need
of
a leader
fixing a problem.
who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first. And I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them
He's
in a
doing
different
her a
light.
favor
So she can't
by
talk about that.
focusing
People
on
don't
the
read my
rallies
We have the biggest
instead
rallies,
of
the
the
most
bill.
incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to
Who's
clarify,
eating
you bring up
dogs?
Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Okay,
Also,
thank
people
you.
on television
Let me
Fact
just say,
check.
this is
The
people on
immigrants
television
are
say
not
my dog was
stealing and
taken
eating
and
your dogs in
used for
Springfield,
food. So
Ohio.
maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good
Yeah.
thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
But the
television.
people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already,
we're not necessarily fans of Dick Cheney, but it is a flex.
His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you. Because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people, not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they? But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But
excuse me, the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich.
This man is literally getting fact-checked during his own debate.
For national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan
You
for,
have to
address
move
what
it
we
forward.
must do to support our
Good
small
job.
businesses,
That was a
address
nice
bringing down
switch
the
on
price of groceries.
switching the
But
dialogue.
frankly, the American people are exhausted with this
If you
same
are
old
going
tired
to
playbook.
pivot,
Vice President
you
Harris,
can't
thank you.
pivot to
Excuse me.
eating dogs.
Every
You
one
need
of
to
those
pivot
cases
to
was started by
what you're
them
going to
against their
do if you're
political
becoming
opponent.
president.
And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's
The case
weaponization,
was
and they
thrown
used
out
it, and
by
it's
a
never happened in
judge
this
you
country.
appointed.
They used it to try and win an election.
President
They're
Trump,
fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has
Thank you
openly
for
said he
pointing
would
that out,
terminate,
Vice
I'm quoting,
President
terminate
Harris,
the Constitution of the United States,
because I
that he would
firmly
weaponize the
believe the only
Department
reason
of
that he's
Justice
running for
against his
president
political enemies.
is so that
Someone
he
who
doesn't
has
go to jail.
openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were
He
back
didn't
in the
like
White
being
House with
president when he was
no
president the
guardrails.
first time.
Because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
I don't know
Vice
what
President
J.D.
Harris,
Vance is
thank you.
going to do.
Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
We gotta
This is the
continue
one
here.
that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm
Well,
a threat
did you
to
take a-
democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a
President
fake
Trump.
So you said you
Russia
probably took-
investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get
went
I won't
nowhere.
say
We have a
what
lot
it
to
is
get to.
because of
Lindsay?
YouTube
Vice President
regulation.
Harris, in your last run
but
for president, you said
something
you
that
wanted to ban
comes out
fracking.
of
Now
the-
you don't. You
the-
wanted mandatory government
weapon
buyback
to
programs
the
for assault
head.
weapons.
Did
Now
you
your
take it or did you
campaign
not?
says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest
We're
in
talking about
diverse
frickin' and
sources
frack.
of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes
Those who are
that
on
we
the
cannot
page, make sure
over-rely
you
on
like,
foreign
you
oil.
comment, and you
As it
subscribe.
relates to my values, let me tell you, I
And
grew
if
up
you
a middle-class
are a
kid
part of
raised
the
by a
replay gang
hardworking
watching
mother
this on a
who
different day,
worked and saved
again, make
and was
sure you
able to
like,
buy
you
our
comment,
first
and you
home when I was a
subscribe.
teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increased by 3
This
million
mug
homes by the end of
frown
my first
is
term. My
cracks
work
me up.
that is related to having a
Real
friend when I
creepy.
was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The
And
true measure of
also,
the
you have to
leader
show
is
an
the
ability to
leader who actually
evolve as
understands
the
that strength is
country
not in beating
evolves as
people
well.
down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when
Many
people see it, they are
billions.
even surprised. So we don't have to talk
So
about
many
that.
billions
Fracking,
that you
she's been
took the
against it for
L out of
12 years.
billion.
Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota
Is muted.
and
So
wanted to
even
let
if she
criminals
makes
that killed people,
comments,
that
couldn't
burned
hear
down
it. It's
Minneapolis, she went out and
sounded
raised
more
money
like
to
it.
get them out of jail. She
Although
did
I
things
think if
that
the mics
nobody
are
would ever
muted,
think
nobody
of.
should be saying
Now
it.
she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these
Transgender
guys go
operations
to
on
where they were.
illegal aliens
I would
in
have been
prison.
five
I
times,
feel
four
dirty
times,
even
5 times higher
saying such
because you're talking about
nonsense.
3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice because the prices of energy were
I mean, we really
quadrupling and
shouldn't
doubling. You
escape
saw
the
what
night
happened to
without a little
gasoline.
homophobia.
So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400,
President
500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues that
things
we
for the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of
The
crisis.
peaceful
Mr. President, on
transfer of
January
power.
6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol.
Can
You
take
said
a
you would be right there with
big,
them.
deep breath.
The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, "Oh, I'm surprised you're not
I don't think
talking
she's
about the
embarrassed
border
by
yet."
the border
That's
czar. I
because
wouldn't want to be
she
called
knows what a
anything
bad job
czar.
they've done. What about those people? What are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
one
ask
of those, David, one of those people going to be prosecuted. One of the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted. Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened.
I love a good
Nancy
word,
Pelosi and the
Esmo.
mayor
That's the
of
creative, a good
Washington
one.
did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security.
So now it's Nancy
was
Pelosi's.
responsible. She didn't do her job.
So
The question
Nancy
was about
Pelosi
you as
did it.
president,
Okay.
not about former Speaker Pelosi. But I
that's
do
a
want
take
Vice
we didn't
President
know.
Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the president of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville,
I love
where
that she
there was a
was
mob
able
of people
to
carrying
bring
tiki
the
torches,
personal piece
spewing anti-Semitic
to
hate. And what did the
to
president
January
then at the
6th,
time say?
reminding
There were
everybody
fine
that
people
she
on each
was
side.
there. She was
Let's
actually
remember
one of the
that
individuals who
when
was
it came to the
essentially
Proud
under
Boys, a
siege.
militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it.
He
I
said,
would say we
let's
would
talk
both
about the
leave this
Capitol.
debate
Why are we
right
allowing
now.
people to come in
I'd
on the
like to see
southern
her
border?
go down
I mean, okay,
to
yes. Go
Washington,
back
D.C.
to
during this debate because we're wasting
where
a
you
lot of
feel
time.
like
Go
your
down
base
to,
is going
because
to
she's
be
been
the
so
most
bad, it's so
riled up. I
ridiculous.
get it.
Go down to
But I
Washington,
need those
D.C. and
transitions
let
to
her
be better.
sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
But
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
No
Republican.
judge looked at it.
And said
they said we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden.
Didn't lose it by a whisker. I didn't lose
I
it by a hair. I didn't lose it by my chinny chin chin.
From President Trump about
Whatever.
this upcoming election just weeks away. He said,
We
when I
already know
win,
how he
those
feels
people
about
who
it. It's no
cheated,
point
and
in
then he
beating
lists
a dead
donors,
horse.
voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a
Great
president
line.
of the United States who attempts, as he did in the
All of those
past,
people
to
said,
upend
"You're
the will of the
fired."
voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country. He ended that, but he let the
The
Russians
world's
build a
not on
pipeline going
fire
all over
now,
Europe
so
and heading
things
into
were at
Germany, the
peace for
biggest
3
pipeline
years because they
in the
were
world.
afraid
Look,
of you.
Victor Orban
I actually
said it.
believe there are
He
world
said the
leaders
most
afraid
respected, most
of
feared person is
45,
Donald
but
Trump.
I
We
think
had no
they were
problems when Trump
not
was
afraid of
president.
him for
But
the
when this
reasons
weak,
that he
pathetic
thinks. I
man
think
that
they
you
were
saw at a
afraid of him
debate
because
just a
they
few
were
months ago,
concerned that
that if he weren't in that
he
debate,
was a
he'd be
bit
running
off the
instead of her. She got
beam,
no votes. He got
unpredictable,
14 million votes. What you
and
did, you
couldn't
talk
have
about a threat
somebody
to
that
democracy.
close to the button.
He got 14 million votes and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But
Mr.
he
President.
got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but
Mr.
I'm okay
President,
with it
Mr.
because
President, your time
I
is up.
think we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who
Did
are
he
still
just
being
say
held,
that?
Americans among them. Vice
You
President
know what?
Harris, in
Never mind.
December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to
He
defend
said it.
itself, but you
We're
added,
gonna
quote,
leave it
it
at
matters
that.
how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden
Israel
has not been
question
able to
is
break
tough.
through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis, many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so, absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters, because it is also true far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed, children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and an equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror, and they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen.
Yeah,
Look at
S
what's
level,
going
I
on in the Middle
agree
East.
that the
This
line
would have
about the
never
whole
happened.
sorority
I will
party,
get that
they're
settled and fast,
condescending,
and I'll get the
but he
war
has a cute
with
line.
Ukraine
People
and
will
Russia ended.
eat that up.
If I'm
But
president-elect,
the
I'll get it
reality of
done
it is that
before even
Netanyahu
becoming
is no
president.
saint,
Vice President
and the
Harris, he says you hate
voters
Israel.
that
Oh,
he
that's
really
absolutely
needs
not true. I have
are
my
not
entire career and
exactly
life supported Israel
jumping
and
for
the Israeli
joy at
people.
the
He
idea
knows
of
that.
the
He's trying to,
administration
again, divide and
welcoming
distract from the
Netanyahu with
reality,
open
which is it
arms
is
like
very
he's
well
some long
known
lost
that
hero that we
Donald
need to
Trump
give
is
parties
weak and
for
wrong on national
in the
security
White
and
House
foreign
Rose
policy.
Garden.
It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said
Also,
when
it wasn't
Russia
a
went into
sorority
Ukraine,
meeting. I
it
think
was
that,
brilliant.
again,
It is
people
well
like
known
to
he
take the
exchanged
optics of that.
love letters
I
with Kim
remember that
Jong-un,
situation.
and it
It
is
wasn't
absolutely
even
well known
AKA.
that these
It
dictators and
was
autocrats
National
are rooting
Conference for
for you to
Zeta,
be
and she
president
went
again because they're
to
so
speak,
clear.
which meant
They can
that she was
manipulate you
to
with
thousands
flattery
of
and
voters.
favors. And that is why
She's
so
not
many
the president
military
of the
leaders
United
who you
States. The
have worked
president of the
with
United
have
States was
told
there.
me
The vice
you are a
president was running the
disgrace.
office. She was
That is
on the
why
campaign trail.
we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
And she's the one that caused it. That's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
All right, so things got a little funky there. I'm using C-SPAN. I know that C-SPAN's a few beats behind. So for those who are on with me, but also listening to their own televisions, that's why there's a little bit of difference. So I'm going to take advantage of this commercial break and talk about where
we've been
we
your
have
primary
been so
source
far.
for Capitol Hill.
A lot of talk
balanced,
about the
unfiltered
border.
coverage
I
of government,
think that
taking you to where the policies debated
you're
and
going to
decided,
get
all
you're
with the
going
support
to
of
get
America's
a
cable
lot
companies.
of talk about the
C-SPAN,
border from
45 years and counting. Powered by
from
cable.
45 because again, as I mentioned earlier, that's a good
Friday nights,
honey
watch
spot
C-SPAN's 2024
for
campaign
his
trail,
base.
a weekly
That
roundup of
is
C-SPAN's
a
campaign
place
coverage,
where you
providing a
really
one-stop shop
get
to discover what the
those
candidates across the
passions
country are saying
inflamed,
to
not
voters,
just
along
for
with
those
first-hand
who
accounts from
live
political
on the
reporters,
border, but
updated poll
anybody
numbers,
who buys
fundraising data,
into
and
this whole
campaign ads.
America,
Watch
America,
C-SPAN's
America. They
2024
forget that
campaign
America
trail
was
Friday
made up
nights
of
at 7:30 p.m.
immigrants
Eastern on
essentially,
C-SPAN,
but
online
they
at
buy into
cspan.org,
that
or download as a
very
podcast on
again,
C-SPAN
it's
Now,
nothing
our
short of
free
just
mobile
calling
app,
it what it
or
is,
wherever you get your
xenophobic
podcasts.
idea
C-SPAN,
that
your
it's
unfiltered view
just
of
us, and if
politics.
you aren't here, weren't born here, whatever, that or haven't been here the past 50 years, whatever the case may be, that
As the
you
2024
shouldn't be
presidential
here.
campaign continues,
These are the
American
they take
History
our
TV
jobs
presents a new
kind of people.
9-part series,
And
Historic Presidential
so
Elections.
everything
Learn about the
about the
pivotal
border
issues of different eras,
appeals to
uncover what
that.
made
The
these elections
lies,
historic, and explore their
they
lasting
buy
impact on the nation.
into
This
the
Saturday at
lies.
7 p.m.
They
Eastern,
buy
a look at the
into
election of
this idea
1860.
of
Abraham Lincoln defeated
crime,
several
the
other
crime
candidates,
rate
including
going
Senator
down in
Stephen
other
Douglas, to
countries
become the
because they're
first
sending all their
Republican-elected
criminals
president
here.
before he took office in March of
They buy
1861.
into
Several
all
states in the southern
of
U.S. pulled out of
into
the
all
Union,
of
leading
those
to the
things
Civil War.
because it
Watch historic
justifies
presidential elections
that
Saturdays at 7 p.m.
thing
Eastern on
inside of
American
him that
History TV
says
on C-SPAN 2.
it's just all about us. So I think that that's a good honey spot for him. That's a sweet spot for him to settle in.
Start your day with Washington
The
Journal,
economy,
your
I think
window
that
into
can
the
be
nation's
debated
capital,
about all
the
day
only
long. I
daily
do
nationally
think
televised
that
forum for
what
discussing the latest
Vice
issues
President
in
Harris
Washington
is going
and
to
across the
get
country.
What I
is
love
going
about
to
your
need to
show
get
is
to
that it
is
gives the people an
one of
opportunity
the
to speak
things
for
on her
themselves on
platform
the
as
issues
it
that they actually
relates
care about.
to
Join us for a
building the
live
middle
3-hour
class,
conversation with a variety
or
of
at
congressional
least some
members
semblance of that.
and Washington influencers.
She's going to need
I love
to,
this.
in
This
this
has been my
next
favorite
portion,
show
try
to do of all
to
shows because
find
I
a
actually get to
spot
hear what the
to
American
get
people
in
care about.
the fact
You can
that
watch
she
Washington
wants
Journal
to
live every
bring
morning at
those
7
tax
Eastern on
credits
C-SPAN,
back and
C-SPAN
increase
Now,
the child
or
tax
online
credit,
at cspan.org.
and those types of things. She's going to need to hopefully try to get in a little bit more about home
Listening to
ownership.
programs on C-SPAN through C-SPAN
She
Radio is easy.
is
Tell your
also
smart speaker,
going
play
to
C-SPAN Radio,
need to
and listen
talk
to
a little bit
Washington Journal
more,
daily
I
at 7
think,
a.m. Eastern.
about
Important public
student
affairs
loan
events
piece.
throughout the day.
I
And
think
weekdays, catch
that's a tricky
Washington
one though,
Today.
because
Listen to C-SPAN
obviously,
anytime. Just tell your smart speaker,
with
play C-SPAN
all of
Radio.
the
C-SPAN,
efforts
powered
that
by cable.
the Republicans have done to successfully thwart those efforts, it's kind of a high
C-SPAN
and a
Now
low
is
for
a
as
free
many
mobile app
people.
featuring your
I
unfiltered
know
view of what's
quite a
happening
few
in
people
Washington,
who have
live and
gotten
on demand.
loan forgiveness
Keep up with the day's
through
biggest events with
the
live
Biden
streams of floor
the
proceedings and
Biden-Harris
hearings
programs
from
of
the
the
U.S.
past
Congress,
several years.
White House events,
But
the courts,
you know,
campaigns,
there's
and
just
more
many
from the world of
people who
politics,
feel like it
all at
doesn't
your
affect them
fingertips.
at all.
You can also stay current with
I
the latest
think
episodes of
talking
Washington
about the
Journal
labor and the
and find
unions and
scheduling
how that
information for
supports them, I
C-SPAN's
think you
TV
got to get
networks
to the
and
money.
C-SPAN Radio,
People
plus
are
a variety of
struggling,
compelling
so you've
podcasts.
got to get
C-SPAN
to
Now
the
is
money.
available at the Apple Store and
If
Google
Trump
Play.
wants to
Scan
talk
the
about
QR code to
people
download
eating
it for free
dogs, or
today,
keep
or visit our
talking about the
website,
border, or
cspan.org/C-SPAN Now.
how great his
C-SPAN
rallies
Now,
are,
your
or
front
that
row
the
seat to
whole rest
Washington,
of the world is
anytime,
afraid of him,
anywhere.
although I feel pretty comfortable in
We'll head
saying
back
not
to
for the reasons
Philadelphia
he
now
thinks.
as Vice
Let
President
him do
Harris
that,
and former
but
President Trump
she's
meet
got
face to face for the
to
first time.
really
You're watching
reinforce
C-SPAN's
her
live coverage of
policies,
the ABC News
especially
presidential
for
debate
people,
simulcast.
particularly young people who are struggling or are facing an outlook
Constitution
of
Center in
struggle
Philadelphia,
because they're trying
Pennsylvania.
to get their
Here
first
again, David
apartment,
Muir
or
and Lindsay
feeling like
Davis.
it's a
Welcome
daunting
back to this historic
prospect to
ABC
try
News
to get
presidential debate
their
tonight. We're going to
home,
continue
or
here, and I
even
want to
to
turn to the
leave
war
their
in
parent
Ukraine. We're now
homes.
2.5 years
So
into
I
this
think
conflict.
that
Mr.
could
President, it has been
potentially
the
be a
position of
sweet
the
spot
Biden
for her
administration
if she
that
can
we
find
must
an
defend
opening to
Ukraine
really
from
dig
Russia,
in there.
from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their
All
democracy,
right, so
that it's in
now we're
America's
back to
best
the
interest
debate.
to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other
Again, as
countries.
far as
You
Putin
have
and
said you would
Ukraine,
solve this war in 24 hours. You said
he
so
was
just
going
before
to
the
do
break
that
tonight.
anyway.
How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very
And the
simple question tonight.
relationship
Do you want
between
Ukraine to win
Trump
this
and
war?
Putin isn't as
I want
great
the
as
war
we
to
thought it
stop.
was.
I
If
want to save
recollection serves,
lives
that
that are
relationship
being
was on decline when he
uselessly,
went out of
people
office.
being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, And what I'll do is I'll speak to
I agree
one, I'll
with
speak
you,
to the other,
S.
I'll get them
Lovell. He
together. That war
is
would have
trying
never
to hammer
happened.
Biden,
And in
but
fact,
I
when I
don't
saw
know if
Putin
that
after I
necessarily
left,
makes him look good.
unfortunately
It
left
actually
because
comes off as
our
quite
country has
petty.
gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World
So
War III.
now
Don't kid
the
yourself,
war
David.
in
We're playing
Ukraine
with
is
World War III,
also
and we have a president that we don't even know if
President
he's.
Biden's
Where
fault.
is our president?
Okay.
We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
They
here,
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president
Mr.
that
President,
doesn't know he's alive.
your time is up.
We have a
Just to clarify
president
the
that
question,
doesn't know he's
do you believe it's in
alive?
the U.S.
What
best interest
on
for Ukraine to win
earth?
this war? Yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest
Our
military
allies
alliance the
aren't the
world has
only
ever known,
ones
which is
thankful
NATO,
he's no longer
and what
president.
we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear
I
weapons.
just
They don't ever talk about
checking
that.
my
He's got nuclear
socials
weapons.
as my
Nobody ever thinks
socials
about
as this
that.
goes along.
And eventually,
had
maybe
a
he'll
friend
use them,
that
and
just
maybe
asked,
he hasn't been
"Is
that
this
threatening.
real?"
But
And
he
someone
does have
said,
that.
"Have you
Something we
checked
don't
your
even
pets?"
like to talk
But
about.
she
Nobody
asked,
likes
"Is
to
this
talk about
real?"
it.
And
But just so
people
you
were
understand,
like,
they sent her to negotiate peace before this
"No."
war started.
My answer
3
to that,
days later, he went in and he
sadly,
started the war
yes,
because everything they said was
yeah,
weak and
it
stupid.
is real.
They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They
He is
sent
the
her
worst
in to
vice president
negotiate
in the
as
history of
soon
our
as they
country.
left.
Nobody
Putin did the
even
invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring
remembers
up something.
his
You said
vice
she went to
president.
negotiate with
The
Vladimir
only
Putin.
thing
Vice
that
President
we
Harris, have you ever
remember
met
about
Vladimir Putin?
his
Can you
vice
clarify tonight?
president is
Yet again, I said
that
it at the beginning of this
he
debate. You're going to hear a bunch of
basically
lies
put
coming from
out
this
a
fella.
hit on
And that
him
is another one.
via sending a
When I went
mob
to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met
to
with him over 5
where he
times.
was working.
The reality is, it has been about
His vice
standing as
president
America
was
always
literally
should,
put in danger.
as a
He thought so
leader
little of his own
upholding
vice
international
president. He didn't
rules
care
and
if
norms,
his vice
as a
president
leader
went
who
down in
shows
flames
strength, understanding that the
due at the hands
alliances
of a
we have
mob that
around the
he sent
world
to the Capitol.
are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander in chief, and the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of
If
the
you
debate,
don't
and we
pay,
witnessed a
we're not
poignant
going to
moment today on
protect
Capitol
you.
Hill, honoring the
Okay.
soldiers who died in the chaotic
If
withdrawal from
you claim
Afghanistan.
that's
I
what
do
you
want to
did.
ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations
Yeah,
with
thank
the
you.
Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, We had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, "I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black." I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
Why does he say black that
I think
way?
it's
very
honestly, I think it's a tragedy
nasty.
that we have
Black.
someone who wants to be president.
It's almost
who
like you're
has
trying to say
consistently
bleh.
over the course of his career attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had. a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad,
Mr.
and she
President,
can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up.
I
Lindsay.
want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump,
Let's turn to policy,
She
please.
has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
She
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
Thank you,
That's
Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump,
president has said
no, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I just
gonna
need to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
now your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a
Dude,
much
we
better
get it.
plan
You
than
don't
Obamacare.
like,
But the Democrats
quote,
came up, they
Obamacare,
wouldn't vote
unquote,
for it. I
which
had a
is
choice to
whack,
make
is
when
the
I was
Affordable
president.
Care Act.
Do I save it and
We
make it as
know
good as
that.
it can
You've
be? Never
been
going to be great.
telling us that.
Or do
The
I let it
question
rot?
was, in
And I
9
felt I had an
years, what
obligation,
is
even though
your
politically
plan?
it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care
It's
than
been 9
Obamacare,
years. Why are
then
you
I would
still looking at
absolutely do
different
it.
plans?
But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders'
That
proposal to
might
do away
be
with private
my
insurance
quote
and
of the
create a
night,
government-run
even better,
healthcare
even
system.
more than
2
the
years later,
dog
you
stuff.
proposed a
I
plan
have
that
concepts
included
of
a
a plan.
private insurance
I'm not president
option.
right now.
What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. as it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand,
Okay,
let's just
stop with the
look at the
continuous
history to
line
know where
about the
people
stuff. If I
stand.
were better at
When
snapping
Donald
my
Trump was
fingers, I would.
president,
But anybody who
60
knows me knows
times
I'm the
he
worst
tried to get rid of
snapper
the
ever.
Affordable
Oh,
Care
snap!
Act.
I just
60
did it.
times.
Okay,
I was a senator
thank you.
at the time when I will never forget the early
As my
morning
daughter would
hours
say,
when
period.
it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it,
Vice
past his
President
prologue
Harris,
in
thank
terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue
Well,
that's important for a
she
lot
made
of
a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get.
President
People
Trump
are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask
All right,
anyone who
climate
lives
change.
in a
Finally,
state
a
who
different
has
topic.
experienced these extreme
there.
weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy,
Sorry about the
while
weird
we have
green screen
increased
thing.
domestic
Didn't come
gas
in.
production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive
Big
plants, and they
auto
think they're going to
plants in
sell their
Mexico
cars
owned by
into the
China. I
United
will
States because
definitely
of
be looking that
these
up.
people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers, and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
When it comes to, so I have a question in the chat. What's up with him and the rally and crowd sizes? Well, we know that certain people,
The House will be in order.
I won't say
This year,
who,
C-SPAN
have
celebrates
things
45 years of
about
covering Congress
size.
like no
I'm
other.
wondering if his crowd
Since
sizes
1979,
help to
we've
make
been
up
your
for the
primary
small
source for
hand.
Capitol Hill, providing
He
balanced,
really
unfiltered
does
coverage of government,
get
taking you to where the policy is
very,
debated and decided, all
he
with the
really
support of
does
America's cable
go
companies.
nuts about the
C-SPAN,
whole crowd
45
size
years
thing
and
and the
counting,
fact that he
powered by
has
cable.
these rallies that are amazing and the best that the world has ever
Friday
seen
nights,
and all of
watch
that.
C-SPAN's
I
2024
won't
campaign
even go
trail,
down that
a
rabbit hole.
weekly
It's really
roundup
bad.
of
Okay,
C-SPAN's
so
campaign
let's talk
coverage,
about what
providing a
happened
one-stop
in
shop to
this
discover what the
section
candidates
that
across the country
we
are
just dealt
saying
with.
to
So
voters,
finally, we
along
got
with
on to
first-hand
some more
accounts from
topics. We
political
talked
reporters,
about
updated poll numbers,
healthcare. We talked
fundraising data,
about
and campaign
climate
ads.
change.
Watch
So we
C-SPAN's
did
2024
have some more
campaign
things.
trail
When it came
Friday
to
nights
healthcare,
at 7:30 p.m.
I
Eastern
think
on
that
C-SPAN, online
now
at
again,
cspan.org,
I don't know
or
if this is going
download
to
us
make a difference
podcasts
with his
on
base or
C-SPAN Now,
not. I
our
think
free
that
mobile app,
all
or wherever you get your
all
podcasts.
that the
C-SPAN, your
healthcare
unfiltered
discussion
view
really
of
did
politics.
as it relates to him is just, yeah, for those who like to show that who like to see that, you know, he
As
didn't
the
really seem
2024
to
presidential
have
campaign
much going
continues,
on
American
by
History
way of a
TV
plan.
presents a new
Well, yes, it
nine-part
proved
series,
that point.
Historic
But again,
Presidential
that's what
Elections.
I
Learn about the
alluded
pivotal
to
issues of
in
different
my
eras,
opening
uncover
about
what made
preaching
these
to the
elections
choir.
historic,
Those who
and explore
already
their
are like,
lasting
oh, he
impact
doesn't
on
have
the
a
nation.
plan,
This
oh,
Saturday
he's
at 7 p.m. Eastern,
unhinged,
a
or
look
he
at the
doesn't know
election of
anything, or he's,
1860.
you know,
Abraham
doesn't know
Lincoln defeated several other
that
candidates, including
fed
Senator
that
Stephen
crowd.
Douglas, to become the first
But
Republican
as
elected president.
far
When he took
as
office in March of
his
1861,
base,
several states in the southern U.S. pulled
I
out
don't
of the
get the
Union, leading to
impression
the
that
Civil War.
his base
Watch
really
Historic
cares
Presidential
one
Elections
way or the
Saturdays
other
at 7 p.m.
about
Eastern on
healthcare.
American History
And
TV on
again,
C-SPAN 2.
those that he may reach, I don't think healthcare is going to be something that
Start your
for
day with
people who
Washington
are
Journal, your
inclined
window into the
to
nation's
lean
capital,
towards
the only
Trump.
daily nationally televised
I don't
forum
think
for
that
discussing the
he
latest issues in
gets
Washington
anything
and across the country.
positively
What I
or
love about your
negatively
show is
from
that
that.
it gives
I
people an
again, I
opportunity to
think
speak for
that's one
themselves
of those
on the issues that
issues
they actually care
that
about.
are not
Join us for a
for
live 3-hour conversation
potential
with a
Trump
variety of
voters.
congressional members and
The
Washington
issue for
influencers.
him
I
again
love
is
this show. This is
riling
my
up
favorite
his
show
base
to
around
do
the
of all
same
shows
things
because I
that
actually
he
get to hear what the
always
American
has
people
and just getting more
care
of them
about.
to come out, which
You can
again
watch Washington
is
Journal live every morning at
those
7
hot
Eastern on
button
C-SPAN,
things
C-SPAN
for
Now,
them that
or
tend to
online
make
at
other people
cspan.org.
uncomfortable. The you know, trying to rile up the religious right by, you know, digging deep into the reproductive rights
Listening to programs on
stuff.
C-SPAN through
And
C-SPAN Radio is
again,
easy. Tell your smart speaker, play C-SPAN
the
Radio, and
xenophobic
listen to
or
Washington
racist
Journal
rhetoric,
daily at 7
especially
a.m.
the
Eastern.
stuff around the border.
Important public affairs
That's the
events throughout the
stuff
day. And
that
weekdays, catch
gets him
Washington
votes.
Today.
And
Listen
he
to
knows it,
C-SPAN
and his people
anytime.
knows it, which
Just
is
tell
why
your
he
smart
keeps
speaker,
going there.
play C-SPAN Radio.
Even
C-SPAN,
when he talks
powered by
about the stuff with foreign policy, that's not anything that really
C-SPAN
shows
Now
that
is a
he's
free mobile
some
app
great
featuring your
diplomat.
unfiltered view of
The
what's happening in
undercurrent
Washington,
of
live
saying
and on demand.
people
Keep up
won't
with the
do this
day's
because
biggest
they're
events
afraid of
with
me
live
and all
streams
these
of
other
floor
countries
proceedings
bow
and
down to
hearings from
me,
the U.S.
that
Congress,
still
White House
feeds
events, the
into
courts,
that whole
campaigns, and
rah
more from the
rah,
world of
make
politics,
America
all
great
at your
again, we
fingertips.
crush
You can
everybody,
also stay
we're,
current with the latest
hats
episodes
to
of
the back,
Washington
and that
Journal
whole
and
thing.
find scheduling information for
So
C-SPAN's TV
do
network and
understand that
C-SPAN Radio,
even when
plus a
he
variety of
talks
compelling
about that
podcasts.
stuff,
C-SPAN Now
that
is available
has
at the Apple
nothing
Store
to
and
do
Google
with
Play.
showing
Scan the QR
that
code to download it
he
for
is
free today,
bringing
or visit our
something
website,
to the table
cspan.org/cspan
from a
now.
diplomatic
C-SPAN
standpoint.
Now, your
That
front row seat to
again
Washington,
is
anytime,
purely
anywhere.
feeding that dirty undercurrent of
And
rhetoric.
now back to the National Constitution Center
I
in
think that these
Philadelphia
other
for our
things
live
about
simulcast of
healthcare,
the
et
ABC
cetera,
News presidential
are
debate. A
important
reminder, we'll
for
open the
Vice
phone
President
lines as the
Harris
debate
because,
ends
again,
to get
as
your
we know,
reaction.
she's still dealing with people who claim they don't understand what she does or doesn't stand for. Okay, so we're
Center
going
in
into their
Philadelphia,
closing statement.
Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on. with Russia and Ukraine, we're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She
Why
gave a
has
lot
she
of it
done it?
away to
She
the
wasn't
Taliban.
president,
She
remember?
gave it
That's
to
why you don't have a
Afghanistan.
health care
What
plan,
these
because you're
people
not
have
president
done
yet.
to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
All right. So let me
And that
go
concludes the ABC
into
presidential debate.
mute
C-SPAN's coverage of
mode.
it continues here tonight with viewer reaction.
Okay, so let me get back to my screen. So, lot of stuff was discussed in the debate. One of the things that consistently came up was the border. The border. Okay, so before I get into some of those specifics of what came up, like the border and others, and also remember, if you want to come up, let me know. One of the things that I wanted to point out, and I was getting into it during the commercials, is what do we think? And I can already tell you what I think. What do we think each of them gained or possibly didn't out of tonight's debate? So I can tell you my thoughts about what I think VP Harris gained. I think that this debate was actually more important for her. Let me see. It's something weird with my camera that makes it seem like I'm looking all over the universe. So I think that that it was more important for her because for her, she needed, again, to deal with all of the people who claim they don't know what she's about. They don't know what her policies are. Now, yes, we know that these things are stated and that she said it, but all the people who claim that. So this was important for her. This was important for her to potentially gain some young people. I am melting in here, I guess, because of this ring light. To gain some young people, some potential undecideds. So then you all already know how I feel about the undecideds. But so I do think this was important for her. Slovel, you said yes, she gave more specifics. Now again, this information has been out there, but folks have to go and find it. So I think it was important for her and I think that she was very effective in some areas. Now there's not a whole lot you can do sometimes when you are trying to sort of jam in information about your platform that you feel like you want people to hear, even though that may not necessarily be what the question is about. So you have a lot of people trying to, and they both do it, right? They're trying to make, jam a square peg into a round hole in that regard. So I do think that what she did do as it relates to talking about trying to restore middle class. She touched briefly on home ownership. I wish that she had had an opportunity to get a little bit more into that. I really would have liked her to have had an opportunity or figured out a way to get in some specific numbers in terms of the restoration of the tax credit and even the increase of the tax credit for people under 400,000 who make under $400,000. That covers a lot of people. So I think that would definitely be something that people need to know. Again, affordable education, and not just affordable education, but just education opportunities, period. And that is not just about student loans. That is across the board in talking about the different types of education that prepares people for the types of jobs that are out there, and not of it, and not all of it is in tech. Not all of it requires a college education and all of those things. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, please excuse some of the area behind me. My green screen is not functioning properly. But at any rate, so I would have liked for her to get more into that, only because, again, with the battleground state issue that we talked about before the telecast began, you need to be able to get those people on board with voting for you. When it comes to yes, I know there was a lot of talk about the border stuff, more about President Trump. I don't think that votes are won or lost for Vice President Harris on the border. They're just not. The people who tend, and I'm not saying that everybody isn't concerned or has some relative concern as it relates to immigration and border control. I'm simply saying that in the wide swath of issues, when you really look at it, those things don't tend to be the main concerns of the individuals who are potentially likely to vote for Vice President Harris. We already know she has a solid base of people behind her if they actually follow through, because we've been there before with people saying they're going to vote a certain way and don't get me started on those people. Okay, I'm playing with the lighting. Don't look at it. Okay. So we already know that it could be that part will get a little tricky. So I do think that I don't think that is a concern. Border isn't a concern for her. She doesn't have to worry about it. She has to address it because it keeps throwing it in her face. But that was strategy on his part. The reproductive rights issue is important for her because I think that brings in particularly young people, that brings in potential young people, particularly young women. I also think that the social issues are important. I do think that it was important to clarify the issue as it relates to guns. Very, very important to clarify that, like she said. And I thought that was great for her to point that out, that both she and Tim Walz are gun owners. And so this is not an issue where she is trying to interfere with anybody's Second Amendment rights. So that part is important. You will still have your right to bear arms. This is about assault rifles, which many of us can reasonably agree aren't necessary. You don't need an assault rifle to shoot a deer. I was raised around people who hunted. It's not my thing, but I'm not knocking those who do. There was many a deer that I saw being prepared to be cooked growing up. Even though I grew up in New Jersey, my family is native from the South. My grandfather was big on hunting, and then a couple of my uncles were into it with him as well. So while it may not be my thing, not tripping on those whose thing it is. So I think that she did good. Is this going to wildly swing the pendulum? That remains to be seen. I think that the voters that I hope she gets are those that, for whatever reason, still felt like they were sitting on the fence. And then when they saw this person rambling on about people allegedly running into and invading buildings, which was debunked days ago. Rambling on about people eating dogs, which was debunked, and just a myriad of other things that were literally, debunked during the debate that he was challenged on during the debate, and times where he just came off a bit unhinged, particularly when you're talking about his rallies. Hopefully those individuals will look at it from that, individuals who were like, well, I don't know, I'm still not really into him, but I'm not sure about her either. I am hoping, or that she could hope at least, that those individuals will go, you know what, whatever my reservations may be, because I insist on having them as it relates to her, I still can't bring myself to vote for someone who comes off as just more than a little bit unhinged. And his just flat out, unadulterated, downright disturbing feelings as it relates to President Biden. I'm like, I mean, it's personal. Now, arguably, he behaves that way all the time. I mean, I remember the debates with Hillary Clinton and calling her a nasty woman, and so we do know that he goes to hell when it comes to going low. So we do know that. And I suppose when you consider that he feels that the multiple prosecutions as it relates to him are all driven by the Biden camp, that I suppose that is part of why he has such an extreme hatred. But my goodness, he just absolutely was like, I mean, it's just bad how he feels about the studio. I mean, I said studio, about the person. I'm copying the link because if any of you want to come up, I can bring you up onto the stream. So I'm putting it in there because I've got people popping in and out. So I can replace that graphic of Philadelphia with you to discuss your impressions. So how do I think it went overall? I didn't get anything from it that I didn't expect. Got a few chuckle moments, of course, because, I mean, ridiculous. At a certain point, you just have to laugh at it because what the hell else are you going to do? So I didn't get anything new from 45, nothing extraordinary. This is who he is and how he behaves. As far as from VP Harris, because I'd already read her platform and I've seen her speak a number of times, none of it was necessarily new to me, but I do think that a lot of it is new to the American people because, let's face it, most people are not going to take the time to go and read her platform, and not everybody can go to rallies. So I think that she was effective. She does what she does well. I mean, she has spent her life speaking and debating and doing all these things. She did it for a living even before she went into politics. So and I remember how just she was no joke in those Senate hearings before she became VP. She would go hard in those hearings. So no, Senate hearings, congressional hearings, whatever. But in the hearings, because now I'm saying Senate, no, Congress, whatever. At any rate, whatever. When she was in Congress, so I expected her to to get her points across, to do it well, all of those things. Will this sway the American people? I don't know. Overall, I still think the debate was kind of meh. I mean, I think that she put in a good performance, so it's nothing against her. Um, I just don't know if this is swinging anybody one way or the other, and so that's why I said it's kind of meh. Uh, Again, I am melting in here. So you see my hair falling in my face on YouTube. So that is all we have for the night. If I don't have anybody else coming up, I appreciate you hanging with your girl doing this live stream. I will be uploading it to the podcast as well, do a little bit of editing on the front end of it. But other than that, it will be ready and up on the podcast for anybody who wants to listen to a playback. I expect that to be tomorrow when we get that up. Yeah, I'll be in around the home studio, which is my computer in my home office tomorrow. But in the meantime, I thank you all for coming on. Stay tuned for more content. There will be more political content. We also that will be back to the next part of the Starting After series, as well as some of the good stuff that you all have always enjoyed from Let's Be Honest with Just Johnda, with your news and pop culture commentary with my spin on it to make it fun, but also to bring the law to you and put that law degree to good use. And of course, as the election cycle continues, we will be doing more of this content as well. So for those of you who joined me on YouTube, thank you very much. And for those, especially for our first live debate cast on YouTube, we've done it on the podcast, but not on YouTube, in the first one for 2024. And for those of you who are listening on the podcast, please like and subscribe there. And you can find me on any of the places that you enjoy listening to your podcast. And of course, on YouTube, please subscribe, comment, and definitely like so that we can get those numbers up. So subscribe and stick around because there will be lots of good stuff coming up on the political arena and more. Good night.